Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and you are very welcome to this late November video all about screening in the garden. Now, we all have areas that we'd rather not people saw, and we're standing here today in front of my such area, which is where the compost bays hide, and hide is the operative word. So today what I want to do is to build a structure, a hedge basically, to hide, to camouflage this section of the garden so that people just don't notice and pass on by and just revel in the flowers and the trees and the other beauty that is elsewhere. So let's get on with the video. Unfortunately, most of us gardeners have an area or a space in the garden that we'd much rather prefer if it wasn't on public view, and we're standing in mine today. And what I can say is, to the south, just over here, we have a native hedge which borders my property and the property of the farmer behind, full of brambles and other things that like to encroach and take up space within the garden. It's a constant battle to hack them back. To the left, to the south side, we have a privet hedge which was established a good while ago. Now behind me, which is west, we have the compost bays. We have also a few fruit trees and fruit bushes and an ugly area of plastic membrane, which I'd rather wasn't on public display. And then to the east, which is in front of me, we have the greenhouse. Now the width of this whole area, it's 15 meters, which is 49 feet, and the whole area is on a slope. There are also some areas of uneven ground. These were originally vegetable beds that have long since been abandoned and which I dug out recently. And as an asset, I do have this large mature bay tree that is really quite handsome. Now, some of the requirements for this screen are that it should provide access to the compost bays up there. So I need to be able to get the wheelbarrow up there to put more trimmings onto the compost bays, and also the ride-on lawnmower needs to be able to get up there because it needs to cut the grass, and that's where it needs to park overnight. So really, I suppose there were only two viable options. One was to build a wide fence, and the second was to build a hedge. Now, both require ongoing maintenance, whether it be trimming for the hedge or painting for the fence. And in the end, I went with the organic option and opted for a hedge here. An evergreen hedge would have been the natural choice, since I would like screening in winter as well as in summer. But a favourite hedge of mine is the beech hedge, and although the beech hedge is deciduous, it should be noted that it does hold on to its dead leaves through the winter, so it does provide screening in winter. I absolutely love beech hedging, Tapestry beech hedging, which is a mixture of the common beech, the green one, and the copper beech, which is a kind of a dark purple, and I like to plant them interspersed, so green, purple, green, purple, green, purple, and that's what I want to do up here. So the great thing about a beech hedge is that it looks fantastic in summer with the variation in colour and all those lush soft leaves. In autumn it's stupendous with its glorious colour. In winter it provides some screening because it holds on to its dead leaves, and then briefly in spring there is a period when it drops all of its leaves, and just before it starts growing the new ones where it is bare, but I can live with that. So I have opted once again for a bare root beech hedge, and the reason why I do bare root is twofold. I suppose really it's much cheaper than buying plants in pots and planting them in the ground, and also bare root hedging, it establishes more quickly and just gets going that bit more quickly. Now, on the downside, you have to wait until mid-November until that bare root hedging can be dug up from the fields where it lives and given to you. So it means that you may be outdoors gardening for longer than you want to be. And that's certainly the case for me this year because it is really, really cold. You can, of course, plant bare root hedging in spring, but it's also pretty cold at that early stage in spring too. So yeah. So how am I going to design this hedge? And there were various options. My husband favoured setting up a corridor to the north of the greenhouse, and there is a small strip of grass there where the lawnmower was originally able to get up. However, we recently purchased a new lawnmower and it happens to be slightly wider than the previous one, with the result that it skims the border as it comes up. So I wasn't very anxious to keep this space as the access to the compost bays because it's just too narrow. Then I thought the way to go was possibly to have the access point behind the big bay tree here, right? So this is quite wide and it is certainly the width of a ride-on lawnmower. So if the access point, the hole in the hedge, was behind the bay tree, then you wouldn't see it. But unfortunately, when you move about on the ground in the garden, from different angles you see different things, and if you just move over a slight bit, I am sure you would be able to see through that hole behind the bay tree and see all those things that I wanted to camouflage. So then I had a better idea, and the idea was to set up a staggered hedge. Imagine if my hedge, my 15-metre hedge, stretched directly from the privet hedge over to the farmer's field here, then there would be no access to the compost bays. So the staggered hedge means that we have two strips of hedging, and you can see here that between the two there is access for a large ride-on lawnmower to pass through, and that is the way we're going to do it. Now, I've skipped ahead here because I've already given you a sneak preview of some of the work that's already done. And yes, if you're going to do a bare root hedge, you do need to plan in advance. You need to get some of the prep work done before you go and get that hedging, because remember, it's not available until mid-November and you don't want to have to start taking off grass and digging holes at that stage. The first thing you need to do for planting out a new hedge is to mark out the area where you want your hedge to be. I did this first with a brightly coloured hose, then more accurately with string stretched between tent pegs. I know it's a bit hard to see in these photographs, but if you look closely you can see the string. Remember to mark out an area that's wide enough for your strip of hedge. I've chosen 70 centimetres or 2.8 feet, which works well for beech hedging. The next step is to cut with a spade or a half-moon edger along the length of the string. You then cut across and along, making a grid of cuts. You're cutting your sod into squares, making them easy to lift and remove. You can then take your fork and slide it down a bit and across underneath the grass, and then lift up your sod. It is heavy work. I did make a video previously on planting a bare root beech hedge, which you can check out if you want to. But some people asked me on that video, why did I remove the grass? And the reason why I remove grass is that the hedge needs no competition in its early days at least. So you could use the lasagna method to remove the grass, which means putting down possibly newspaper and then layers of earth and clippings and leaving the whole area for 6 months to a year before planting. So that means you need certain forethought and certain planning, and most of us really aren't that together, let's just face it. The other suggestion is to just dig the holes and cover the surrounding grassy area with membrane or newspaper and clippings, as you did with the lasagna method. Now, this will kill the grass in a growing season, but you have to remember that that first growing season is key for your new hedge, and you don't want it to struggle and compete with the grass, which is still pulling nutrients out of the soil as it dies. The grass will compete with your hedge for as long as it's alive. So you do really need to remove the grass before you plant your hedge. Now, any sods of grass that you remove can be used to place in dips on the lawn. And as I already showed you, I have vegetable beds, ex-vegetable beds here that need to be filled in. So I'm placing the sods here. Now, it does look messy at first, but if you stamp it down hard and if you wait, you'll be surprised at how quickly those sods will knit together. And by this time next year, you'll certainly not know that anything different has happened to this area of the grass as elsewhere. Remember also, this isn't a croquet lawn. This lawn doesn't have to be smooth. It just needs to be good enough. If you don't have dips in your lawn that you need to fill, well, lucky you. You can use the sods that you remove to put on your compost. So just turn them upside down, grassy side down, and tightly pack them in the compost area. And within 6 months probably, that grass will die down and you'll have lovely frayable earth. Hedging needs to be planted 1 to 2 feet apart. I've decided to plant my hedges 1.5 feet apart. So I cut a stick to that distance and use the stick to measure where I mark out the area for the hole. And I mark the area for the hole by placing a pile of small stones. The next step is to dig your holes nice and deep, making sure that there are no stones at the base, because you don't want the roots of your bare root hedging impacting on those stones and not going any further. Now, of course, the best advice is to dig a trench, and a hedge will do better if planted in a trench. But while a trench might be optimal for a hedge, for a bare root hedge, it's certainly not optimal for my poor back. It has taken me a few short moments to explain to you the work that's been done so far to prepare for my bare root hedging, but I can tell you that it has taken several days and quite a bit of effort. This work, it is strenuous. It's not terrible, but it is strenuous, and you do need to have the weather on your side, which is another reason, I guess, why people kind of get put off bare root hedging. But you'd be surprised how many sunny or dry days you can get if you keep your eye out and you know that you have your goal in mind. So now, tomorrow is the day when I go down to Van der Velde Nursery in Aughrim in County Wicklow to pick up my bare root hedging and hopefully get them all into the ground tomorrow. Good morning everybody, and today's the day when I go to pick up my beech hedging, Beech, like we see behind me here, and plant it in the garden. So I have a big day ahead of me, lots to do. I had hoped to be up earlier this morning, but I think it's 9 o'clock now, a bit later than I'd expected, but there it goes. So lots to do, and I want to get everything finished today because there is an exhibition in the photo museum in Dublin tomorrow that I want to go to, and I can't go unless I get my hedging into the ground, because those roots, they really need to be reburied as quickly as possible. On my way, I'm going to stop off at the post office and post off a copy of my book, Journal of an Irish Garden, which is going to a lady in Meath. And I'm doing autographed copies this year, which, well, you can see the details of that if you look on the community page here on YouTube. I'm just delaying the inevitable, I think, at this stage, because it's such a dull, dark morning, like it was yesterday. I couldn't believe when I looked at the footage I made yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon how blooming dark it was, and today is it's a repeat performance. However, it's not raining, and that's definitely good. I'm going to take that. Okay, here we go. They're a bit long, aren't they, Nicolette?
No.
Thank you very much. Oops.
You may have to go another little bit. Perfect. That's lovely. And your weed barrier.
Okay.
That's great.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hey, so I'm just back from Van der Velde Kappa Nursery in Aughrim, County Wicklow, where I get all my bare root hedging from. And you met Nicolette just a second ago. And Nicolette I know from a good way back, so I think the first conversation I had with her was 15 years ago, when I went into the nursery looking for a tree to plant for my mother who had died. And my mother had always loved the idea of liquid amber, which you couldn't get in Ireland in those days. And anyway, I had a lovely conversation with Nicolette. Now, you may wonder at the name Van der Velde, because it is not Irish, it's Dutch, but this nursery has been in Ireland for as long as I have, so it dates from the 1960s. Now, when I was getting the bare root hedging, Nicolette was sharing some very interesting facts with me, I guess, on climate change. And her deceased mother used to keep a gardening diary where she noted everything in. And can you believe, back in the 1960s, they used to lift bare root hedging at the end of September. At the end of September. Now, the decision on when to lift your bare root hedging is usually made by the fact that you've had a couple of frosts. But this year we haven't had a frost yet, and we're marching towards the end of November. So if you don't have frosts, then you might look for other indications that it's time to lift the hedging. And in the case of beech, it happens when the leaves turn brown and kind of the plant holds on to to those leaves. So it's so late this year that they were able to lift the bare root hedging, and that I was able to go along and get it. And so interesting how I suppose gardening has changed over the course of several decades. Nicolette says she plans on writing a book about the nursery and her mother's experience, her mother who kept the diary. So, well, that would be wonderful. I'd absolutely love to read that if she ever gets around to publishing it. So thank you very much to Nicolette from Kappa or Van der Velde Nursery in Aughrim, County Wicklow, which you really should check out, because no better place to meet all of your bare root needs, and it is the best and most efficient way to plant a hedge. Okay, so speaking of hedge, the sun has come out, which is wonderful, and what I want to do now is I'm going to have a cup of tea. Yeah, I'm going to have a cup of tea, but before I do, let's pop this hedging into the buckets of water that I've prepared over here. So I've got one bag of green and one of purple beech, and I must not get them mixed up, because then we will not have an alternate hedge. We will just have mishmash of God knows what. And that is the kind of wonderful root system you get from growing plants in the ground. So these have been grown in the field beside the nursery, and when it's time to dig them up, they're dug up and they're presented and sold as bare root plants. Let's get this in some water, because we've got fine roots here that will suffer if they dry out. I'll get to them in a very short period of time. Oops. Feels like putting up a Christmas tree. What did I do with my secateurs? There it is. Up. Okay, so you see how tall this hedging is, and you can buy bare root hedging in different heights, and I chose to go with a tall one because I'm getting old and I can't be starting out with a teeny tiny little hedge. I went for, I think it's 120 centimetres tall, this one. And that reminds me of a question that several people asked me when I made the last video on planting bare root hedging, and they asked, should you cut the hedging back? Well, certainly I would say in terms of the beech hedging, I'm not going to cut back these hedges that I've paid extra money for to get them taller. I want them to stay tall and to establish and to get going. So 1 cup of tea later, I can't believe they are still standing up. They wouldn't stand up when I was here before. Okay, so I have brought some compost that I am going to use, or potting mix, so I'm going to use in the holes, and I'm just going to add some seaweed fertiliser to it. Blood and bone you can use, but I like this from Ocean Leaves. It's a seaweed fertiliser and I find it really, really good. Now, can you believe there are 30 bushes in total, 15 copper beech and 15 common beech, and I am going to make an alternate hedge. They scrunch up very small, don't they? So this is the copper beech, and I'm going to lay it out because they look absolutely identical and it would be easy to make a mistake. So I'm going to lay out the copper beech first beside the planting holes that they're going to be planted in. Whoops. Oh, there they are. And yeah, let's do that. Now, the copper beech is more expensive than the ordinary beech, so I want to make it prominent, and I'm starting this hedge with a copper beech. And now the copper beech hedging has all been laid out adjacent to the hole I'm going to plant it in. Here's the first one that's going to go in to this hole here, and it has a fine root system, and I'm going to plant it to the depth that it was previously in the field. So you can tell that because it's going to be wet, moist. Yeah, I'm not 12, I don't mind that word. So I'm just going to place it into the hole and to backfill a bit with some of the compost mix and also with some of my soil. So I want a mix of both. If you put too much compost in there, too much good stuff, then the plant will tend to stay in the hole and not go out, and you want the roots to go out and into the adjacent soil, especially since we're not digging a trench. Okay. And now I've put down all the purple ones, we need to move on to the green, and the green is in here, and we're going to open them, and there they go. We're going to lay them in position. I will choose a nice, strong, rooty one for the end because, well, I guess the end is more likely to be hit by wind and stuff like that. It's all done. Well, it's not all done, but it's all planted. So we've got alternate copper beech and green beech hedging. It's getting dark. I'm not quite sure what time it is, but it's dark here at 4:30 at the moment, so probably about 4 o'clock. It just remains for me to give these a good watering in. Now, I mightn't get all of the watering in done today because I'm running out of time, so I will do some more watering in tomorrow. And the plan is to actually cover the ground around these plants with membrane just to help keep the weeds down. So for the first couple of years with a newly planted bare root hedge, you have to make sure that they're well weeded, dirty hands, that they're fed and they're watered, and that is very important. So because I'm putting membrane around them, I'm going to have to spend extra time watering and even just shoving some food in around the holes at the neck of the plants. So it's one of this and half a dozen of the other. Less time weeding but more time watering and feeding, but so it goes. I'm very pleased with the hedge. I can see how this is going to look longer term. Van der Velde even gave me a free small copper beech piece of hedge, which I've put up there at the very end, right up against the native hedge. So I hope it will do well. And if you're in the market for bare root hedging, I highly recommend Van der Velde Kappa Nursery in Aughrim, County Wicklow. They are the best, so they are, yeah. And that's all for now. Cold, tired, going inside. Have a great day. Bye.